When the Dark Lord of the Sith falls through reality's tier, he finds a universe where his darkness is merely a shadow. The air burns with sulfur and screams. His mechanical breath falters in hell's atmosphere. Here, even hatred has a hierarchy, and every demon senses something familiar in his rage. What happens when the man who conquered galaxies faces the dimension that devours gods? The corridors of the Death Star fell silent as Darth Vader strode through them. His mechanical breathing echoed against the cold metal walls, a metronomic pulse that marked the passage of fear through the station. Stormtroopers stood at attention, their white armor gleaming under the artificial lights, but their rigid posture betrayed the terror that gripped them whenever the Dark Lord passed by. Vader paid them no mind. His thoughts were consumed by a disturbance in the Force, something ancient and terrible that called to him from beyond the stars. The Emperor had summoned him to a secret laboratory, deep within the bowels of the Death Star. It was a place few knew existed, where forbidden technologies and arcane sciences merged in service to Palpatine's insatiable hunger for power. As Vader entered the chamber, he found his master standing before a pulsing tear in reality itself. The air shimmered and cracked with energy unlike anything the Dark Lord had ever encountered. "Ah, Lord Vader," Palpatine said, his voice a rasping whisper that slithered through the air. "You have arrived just in time to witness my greatest achievement." The Emperor gestured toward the spatial anomaly. "I have discovered a way to pierce the veil between dimensions. Imagine the power that awaits us on the other side, the knowledge and weapons we could claim for the Empire." Vader stood motionless, observing the fluctuating tear. Something about it disturbed even him, a warrior who had slaughtered countless beings across the galaxy. This was not the natural order of things. This was not the will of the Force. "Master, the energy signature is unstable. The calculations must be verified before proceeding." Palpatine's face twisted in a snarl. "You dare question my methods? I have seen beyond the boundaries of our reality. There is a source of energy there that dwarfs even the power of the Force. With it, not even the rebellion will stand against us." He raised his gnarled hands toward the rift, which pulsed in response, growing larger, more volatile. Lightning crackled between his fingers, merging with the energies of the tear. Vader sensed the danger too late. The rift expanded exponentially, consuming the equipment around it. Alarms blared throughout the station as the Death Star's power grid fluctuated wildly. "Master, stop this now," Vader commanded, igniting his crimson lightsaber. But the Emperor was lost in his lust for power, channeling more energy into the expanding maw. The laboratory erupted in a blinding flash of crimson and gold. Vader was thrown backward, his armor absorbing the initial blast. As he regained his footing, he saw the rift consuming everything in its path, including the Emperor himself. Palpatine's screams cut through the chaos as his body was torn apart by forces beyond comprehension. Vader turned to escape, but the pull of the dimensional tear was too strong. His boots scraped against the floor as he was dragged toward the yawning portal. With a final surge of the Force, Vader attempted to shield himself as the rift swallowed him whole. His consciousness scattered across realities, shredded and reformed countless times in the span of what felt like both an eternity and a single heartbeat. The Force itself seemed to scream around him, distorted and perverted by energies it was never meant to touch. When Vader's senses returned, he found himself kneeling on a floor of burnished metal that glowed with strange runes. His respirator labored against an atmosphere heavy with sulfur and ash. The air was superheated, nearly beyond what his suit's cooling systems could handle. As his vision cleared, Vader took in his surroundings. Gone were the sterile corridors of the Death Star. In their place stood a vast cathedral-like chamber adorned with grotesque sculptures and technological marvels that seemed to blur the line between machine and flesh. A massive window revealed a landscape that could only be described as hellish. The sky burned red, churning with energy that reminded Vader of the tear that had brought him here. Jagged mountains of obsidian reached toward the crimson heavens, while rivers of what appeared to be molten metal carved through the blackened earth. In the distance, colossal structures rose like the bones of fallen gods, their purpose incomprehensible yet unmistakably malevolent. Vader rose to his feet, his lightsaber hissing to life in his hand. The familiar weight of the weapon offered some comfort in this alien realm. He reached out with the Force, seeking to understand his new environment, but what returned to him nearly brought the Sith Lord to his knees once more. The Force existed here, but it was warped, corrupted, saturated with suffering and rage on a scale that dwarfed even the darkest corners of his own galaxy. The dark side surged through Vader's being, more potent than he had ever experienced. It was intoxicating, terrible in its purity. This place fed the darkness within him, amplifying it beyond measure. For a moment, Vader stood transfixed, drinking in the raw power that permeated every molecule of this twisted reality. His meditation was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. Vader turned to face a procession of beings that defied description. They were humanoid in the broadest sense, but their forms were warped and mutilated. Some bore mechanical augmentations that fused seamlessly with their flesh. Others seemed to be composed of raw energy contained within suits of arcane technology. They were led by a figure whose pristine white armor stood in stark contrast to the corruption that surrounded them. "The intrusion has been contained," the leader announced, its voice modulated and cold. "Preliminary scans indicate extra-dimensional origin. Argent energy readings are unprecedented." The being approached Vader without fear, studying him with clinical detachment. "Identify yourself, intruder." Vader felt no need to answer to these creatures. Instead, he reached out with the Force, intending to crush the leader's throat. To his surprise, the being merely staggered back a step, seemingly protected by some form of energy shield. "Interesting. I am Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. You will tell me where I am and how I can return to my dimension." The leader tilted its head, the featureless helmet betraying no emotion. A dimensional traveler with telekinetic capabilities. Fascinating. It gestured to its companions, who began to encircle Vader. "You have arrived at a most fortuitous time. The UAC always welcomes new subjects for our Argent energy experiments. Your biological and technological components appear unique. They will make valuable contributions to our research." Vader had not survived decades as the Emperor's enforcer by tolerating threats. With a gesture, he sent a wave of Force energy outward, throwing the beings back. Two were impaled on the sharp architectural features of the chamber, their bodies erupting in sprays of gore that seemed to steam and sizzle as it hit the floor. The leader and 3 others remained standing, protected by their energy fields. "Impressive," the leader acknowledged, "but ultimately futile. Security protocols have been activated. Welcome to the UAC's Mars facility, traveler. You may call me Director Hayden. Your cooperation is preferred, but not required for what comes next." Before Vader could respond, the floor beneath him illuminated with the same strange runes he had noticed earlier. Energy surged around him, forming a containment field that even his lightsaber could not immediately penetrate. As he fought against his confinement, Vader saw more creatures entering the chamber. These were different, less human in appearance. Their bodies were twisted masses of muscle and bone, adorned with symbols that burned with unholy fire. They moved with predatory grace, eyeing Vader with hunger and something akin to recognition. "The Hell Priests have expressed interest in your arrival," Director Hayden informed him, gesturing to the monstrous newcomers. "It seems you have made quite an impression on their dimension as well. They sense a kindred spirit in you, Lord Vader. Perhaps an accommodation can be reached that satisfies all parties." Vader felt the dark presence of these Hell Priests probing at his mind, attempting to invade his thoughts. They were powerful in ways that differed from Force users, but Vader's mental shields were forged through decades of pain and discipline. "I serve no master but myself," he declared, focusing his rage against the containment field. The runes flickered as cracks appeared in the energy barrier. Hayden stepped back, clearly surprised by Vader's resilience. "Increase power to the containment field," he ordered. "Prepare the Lazarus injection. If he cannot be controlled, he will be harvested." The Hell Priests hissed in disapproval, speaking in a language that Vader could not understand but somehow comprehended on a primal level. They saw him not as a subject but as a potential ally, a warrior whose darkness rivaled their own. One of them, taller than the others and adorned with a crown of bone and metal, approached the containment field without fear. Son of fire and shadow, it spoke directly into Vader's mind. "Born of hatred and remade in pain, we have waited for one such as you. The Slayer hunts our kind, but you could stand against him. Join us, and hell will bow before you." Vader felt the sincerity in the creature's offer. These beings recognized the darkness within him, the rage that had fueled him since that fateful day on Mustafar. For a moment, he considered their proposal. To command the legions of this hell dimension might provide the power he needed to overthrow the Emperor upon his return. But Vader had not survived this long by trusting the promises of monsters. "I am not your savior," Vader replied, channeling his hatred into the Force. The containment field shattered in a burst of energy that threw everyone back. Before they could recover, Vader seized one of the UAC soldiers with the Force, crushing his armor and the body within. Blood and mechanical components rained down as Vader carved through another with his lightsaber. The crimson blade left cauterized wounds that glowed with the same energy that permeated this reality. The Hell Priests retreated, not in fear but in strategic withdrawal. They had seen enough to know that this visitor was neither ally nor easy prey. Director Hayden barked orders into a communication device, summoning reinforcements. "Lock down all sectors. Release the possessed units. The intruder must not reach the Argent processing plant." Alarms blared throughout the facility as Vader strode toward what appeared to be an exit. His connection to the Force was growing stronger by the second, fed by the ambient energy of this realm. He could sense thousands of life forms throughout the massive complex, some human, others decidedly not. All registered in the Force as sources of pain, fear, or malevolence. This entire facility was a nexus of the dark side. As Vader reached the corridor outside the chamber, he was met by a squad of armed guards in heavy armor. They opened fire immediately, their weapons discharging not lasers but superheated plasma that even Vader treated with respect. He deflected several bolts with his lightsaber before taking cover behind a structural column. The plasma ate into the metal where it struck, releasing acrid smoke. "Target has unknown energy weapon. 1, soldier reported. Conventional suppression ineffective." Vader reached out with the Force, sensing the mechanical components within their weapons. With a gesture, he caused the plasma regulators to fail. The resulting backfire consumed 3 of the soldiers in explosions of blue-white energy. The survivors fell back, calling for heavier support. Vader did not give them the opportunity to regroup. He surged forward, lightsaber carving through armor, flesh, and bone with equal ease. As the last soldier fell, Vader accessed the computer terminal on the man's wrist device. The technology was different from what he was accustomed to, but the principles were similar enough. He navigated through security protocols and accessed a schematic of the facility. The UAC Mars base was vast, a sprawling complex of research labs, processing plants, and what appeared to be containment sectors for entities designated as demonic specimens. Most interesting was a sector labeled Argent Energy Processing. According to the files, this Argent was harvested from another dimension called Hell and converted into an unprecedented power source. The energy readings were beyond anything the Empire had ever achieved, even with kyber crystals. If Vader could secure this technology, he could return to his galaxy with power that would make the Death Star obsolete. But first, he needed to understand more about this reality and find a way back to his own. The files mentioned interdimensional travel technology being developed in a sector called Lazarus Labs. That would be his primary destination. As for this Slayer the Hell Priest had mentioned, Vader would need more information. Any being feared by creatures of such power might be either a valuable ally or a necessary adversary. Vader's planning was interrupted by a tremor that shook the entire facility. Warning lights flashed as an automated voice announced, "Containment breach in Sector 7, Hell Wave detected. All personnel, evacuate to designated safe zones. Slayer protocol now in effect." The corridor ahead of Vader filled with a sickly red light as reality itself seemed to tear open. From the breach poured creatures that embodied corruption and violence. Some were twisted humanoids with exposed muscle and bone, wielding crude weapons and shrieking with bloodlust. Others were massive behemoths with cybernetic implants, their bodies housing weapons that merged technology with flesh in ways that even Vader found disturbing. The demons surged forward, but they halted upon seeing Vader. Like the Hell Priests before them, they sensed something familiar in him. The dark side of the Force and the energy of Hell resonated at similar frequencies, recognizing each other across dimensional boundaries. For a moment, the corridor was silent save for Vader's mechanical breathing and the guttural sounds of the demonic horde. Then, from the rear of the demonic ranks, emerged a figure unlike the others. It wore ornate armor adorned with symbols of authority, and its head was crowned with curved horns. In its hand was a staff that crackled with energy similar to Force lightning, but corrupted, twisted into something even more malevolent. "The prophecy speaks true," the Demon Lord rumbled, its voice a cacophony of overlapping tones. "The Dark One comes from beyond, bearing the mark of the Ancients." It gestured toward Vader with its staff. "Your arrival was foretold in the Tablets of Ruin. You will either kneel before the forces of Hell or be consumed by them. Choose wisely, warrior of shadow." Vader had heard enough prophecies and ultimatums to last several lifetimes. He responded not with words but with action. Drawing deeply on the Force, enhanced by the ambient energy of this place, he unleashed a storm of telekinetic fury. The lesser demons were torn apart, their bodies reduced to mists of blood and fragments of bone. The Demon Lord stood firm, protected by its own energy field, but even it was forced to take a defensive stance. "So be it," it snarled. "You choose the path of the Slayer. Hell remembers its enemies, Dark One. We are eternal, and our vengeance spans dimensions." With a gesture of its staff, the Demon Lord opened another portal and retreated, leaving its lesser minions to deal with Vader. The Dark Lord cut through them methodically, his lightsaber a blur of crimson death. Each fallen demon released bursts of energy that Vader could feel through the Force. This energy, presumably the Argent mentioned in the files, flowed into the environment, and he discovered, into himself. With each kill, Vader felt his connection to this realm's power growing stronger. As the last demon fell, Vader noticed a weapons cache nearby. While his lightsaber was effective, diversifying his arsenal would be prudent in this hostile environment. He approached the cache and examined its contents. The weapons were primitive by Imperial standards, using physical projectiles rather than energy, but some were augmented with the same Argent technology that powered the facility. Vader selected a weapon labeled Plasma Rifle and examined it. Unlike blasters, this weapon superheated particles to a plasma state using Argent energy, resulting in projectiles that caused both thermal and kinetic damage. It would serve as an effective ranged option, complementing his lightsaber and Force abilities. Equipped with new weaponry, Vader continued through the facility, following the schematics toward Lazarus Labs. The corridors showed signs of recent combat, with bodies of UAC personnel and demons alike strewn across the floor. Blood and other fluids formed patterns that reminded Vader of the Sith glyphs he had studied in his youth. This was no coincidence. The connections between the dark side and this Hell dimension were becoming increasingly apparent. As Vader rounded a corner, he encountered a new threat. UAC personnel, or what remained of them, shuffled toward him with jerky, unnatural movements. Their bodies were partially transformed, flesh merging with mechanical components and pulsing with corrupt energy. Their eyes glowed with the same infernal light that emanated from the demonic portals. "The humans are converted through a process they call possession," came a voice from behind Vader. He turned to find a holographic projection of Director Hayden. "Their bodies are infused with argent energy, and their souls are consumed by entities from the Hell dimension. They become the perfect fusion of human ingenuity and demonic resilience, a fascinating process from a purely scientific perspective." Vader did not bother responding to the director's clinical assessment. Instead, he dispatched the possessed humans with efficient brutality. Unlike the demons, these creatures released no energy upon death. Whatever essence they once had was already consumed. "You continue to impress, Lord Vader." Hayden's projection continued. "Most visitors from other dimensions are overwhelmed by the horrors of hell, but you adapt quickly. Perhaps this is why the demons show such interest in you. They recognize a kindred spirit." Vader paused, fixing the hologram with the blank stare of his mask. "You know my name, yet I did not provide it during our brief exchange." "Explain." The holographic Hayden clasped his hands behind his back. "When you arrived, I took the liberty of scanning your mind, a surface reading only, but enough to gather basic information. Your mental barriers are impressive, but the technology here is beyond anything in your reality. We know you are Darth Vader, once Anakin Skywalker, now servant to an Emperor Palpatine. We know you seek power through this force you command, and we know you have suffered great loss." Rage surged through Vader at this invasion of his privacy, at the mention of his former identity. He lashed out with the Force, but his power passed harmlessly through the hologram. "Your anger is understandable," Hayden said, unperturbed, "but also predictable. The UAC has studied beings like you for decades. Those who channel pain and rage into power. In many ways, you are not so different from the Hell Priests or even the Slayer himself. All of you transform suffering into strength. What is this Slayer you and the demons speak of?" Vader demanded, seeing an opportunity to gather intelligence. The holographic Hayden seemed to consider how much to reveal. "The Doomslayer is a warrior of unparalleled ferocity who has waged a one-man war against the forces of hell for eons. The demons fear him above all else. He is anathema to their very existence. Currently, he is contained within our facility, but recent events suggest that may soon change. The breach you witnessed was likely a first attempt by Hell to reach him before he awakens. This information was valuable. A warrior capable of instilling fear in these demons would be a significant variable in Vader's plans. Where is he being held? In a containment facility adjacent to Lazarus Labs, coincidentally your current destination, but I would advise against seeking him out. The Slayer knows only one truth: all demons must die. And in your current state, saturated with the energy of this realm, he would likely perceive you as one of them." The hologram flickered, and Hayden's posture changed. "We're detecting another breach, larger than the first. The Hell Wave is approaching your position. I suggest you proceed to the transit system 2 levels below. It will take you directly to Lazarus Labs." The projection disappeared, leaving Vader alone in the blood-soaked corridor. The Dark Lord considered his options. The director's suggestion might be a trap, but the schematics confirmed that the transit system was indeed the most direct route to Lazarus Labs. Whether Hayden was being truthful about the Hellwave was irrelevant. Vader had faced armies before. Demons would be no different. As if summoned by his thoughts, the walls around Vader began to pulse with unholy light. Symbols etched themselves into the metal, burning with hellfire. The temperature rose sharply as reality weakened, allowing the hell dimension to bleed through. Vader raised his lightsaber, prepared for what would emerge. The breach tore open the fabric of reality with a sound like the screams of 1,000 tortured souls. Through it came not the lesser demons Vader had encountered before, but something far more imposing. A massive creature stepped through, its body a mountain of muscle and armor. Curved horns swept back from its bull-like head. and its eyes burned with infernal intelligence. In its hands was a weapon that combined elements of an axe and a cannon, glowing with the same energy that permeated this realm. Behind the behemoth came a wave of lesser demons, their numbers far greater than the previous encounter. They spread out, surrounding Vader, but maintained their distance, waiting for the command of the massive demon lord. The creature regarded Vader with a mixture of hatred and respect. "Dark One," it rumbled, its voice causing the very air to vibrate. "I am Baron of Hell, warlord of the Sixth Circle. The priests were wrong about you. You are not the fulfillment of the prophecy. You are an aberration, a fragment of darkness from a realm that should remain separate from ours." It raised its weapon. "Your essence will feed the well of souls, and your armor will adorn my throne." Vader had faced larger opponents before, beings of incredible strength and ferocity, but he sensed that this Baron possessed power beyond physical might. It commanded the energies of hell with the same facility that Vader commanded the Force. This would be a true test of his abilities in this new reality. The Baron charged, moving with surprising speed for its size. Vader leaped aside, using the Force to enhance his agility. The creature's weapon slammed into the floor where he had stood, releasing a shockwave of energy that cracked the reinforced metal. Vader countered with a slash of his lightsaber, scoring a burn across the Baron's armor, but failing to penetrate deeply. The lesser demons surged forward at their master's attack. Vader found himself beset on all sides, a situation that would have overwhelmed a lesser warrior. But the Dark Lord of the Sith was in his element. Violence was his language, death his oldest companion. He moved with mechanical precision, lightsaber and force powers, creating a zone of destruction around him. The Baron observed the slaughter of its minions with growing rage. It raised its weapon high, channeling hell energy into a concentrated blast that Vader barely deflected with his lightsaber. The force of the impact drove him back several steps, his boots scoring furrows in the metal floor. The Baron pressed its advantage, closing the distance with another charge. This time, Vader stood his ground. As the Baron swung its massive weapon, Vader ducked beneath the arc and drove his lightsaber upward. The blade sank deep into the creature's arm, severing tendons and burning through bone. The Baron roared in pain and fury, its wounded arm hanging useless at its side. Vader pressed his attack, using the Force to hurl debris at the Baron while closing for another strike with his lightsaber. But the Demon Lord was far from defeated. With a guttural incantation, it summoned a wall of hellfire that forced Vader to retreat. The flames were not merely physical. They burned with spiritual malevolence that challenged even the Dark Lord's connection to the Force. Through the curtain of flame, the Baron retrieved its fallen weapon with its remaining hand. "You fight well, Dark One," it acknowledged. "But hell does not yield so easily. We have broken gods and consumed worlds. Your dimension will be next." Vader felt a shift in the energies around him. The Baron was channeling power from beyond the breach, drawing strength from hell itself. Its wounds began to close, as its body pulsed with renewed vigor. This ability to regenerate would make the creature a formidable opponent indeed. But Vader too had been changed by this realm. The ambient argent energy resonated with the dark side of the Force, enhancing his powers in ways he was only beginning to understand. He reached out, not just with the Force, but with his newfound connection to this reality's energies. The result was beyond what even he had anticipated. The Baron's regeneration halted as Vader seized control of the argent energy flowing into it. The creature's eyes widened in shock and, for the first time, fear. "Impossible," it gasped. "No mortal can command the pure essence of hell." "I am no mortal," Vader declared, tightening his invisible grip. "I am Sith." With a gesture, Vader reversed the flow of energy, drawing it from the Baron into himself. The creature writhed in agony as its power was siphoned away. The lesser demons shrieked and fled, terrified by this display of dominance over their master. The Baron fell to its knees, its once imposing form withering as Vader absorbed its essence. As the last of the Baron's energy flowed into him, Vader approached the weakened Demon Lord, It looked up at him with hatred and a newfound respect. "You may kill me, Dark One, but hell is eternal. Others will come. The icon of sin stirs, the mother of demons watches. You have only delayed the inevitable." Vader brought his lightsaber down in a final decisive strike. The Baron's head separated from its body, both dissolving into particles of argent energy that Vader absorbed. The breach that had allowed the demon's entry began to close, the symbols on the walls fading as reality reasserted itself. But the Baron's warning lingered in Vader's mind: icon of sin, mother of demons. New players in a game whose rules he was still learning. He would need to accelerate his plans. Lazarus Labs and its interdimensional technology were now more crucial than ever. As the last echoes of the breach faded, Vader made his way to the transit system. The path was clear, the demons having retreated following their master's defeat. The doors to the transit platform slid open to reveal a sleek transport vehicle waiting on magnetic rails. Unlike the rest of the facility, this area showed no signs of demonic corruption or battle damage. It had been preserved, perhaps deliberately. Vader entered the transport, alert for any trap. The doors closed behind him, and a holographic interface activated. "Welcome, honored guest." Came a voice different from Hayden's, more synthetic and subservient. "This automated transport will convey you to Lazarus Labs as requested. Estimated travel time, 7 minutes. Please secure any loose items and prepare for high-velocity transit." The transport hummed to life, accelerating rapidly along the rails. Through reinforced windows, Vader observed the true scale of the UAC Mars base for the first time. The facility extended for miles in all directions, a sprawling complex of research centers, manufacturing plants, and defense installations. In the distance, massive towers collected the crimson energy that permeated the atmosphere, channeling it into storage facilities below. But what caught Vader's attention was the state of the base. Entire sections were overrun with demonic corruption, buildings transformed into twisted parodies of their original forms. Flesh and metal merged in grotesque structures that pulsed with unholy life. UAC personnel fought desperate battles against waves of demons, their weapons flashing bright against the red-tinged landscape. It was a war zone, and the humans were losing. The transport plunged into a tunnel, cutting off Vader's view of the surface. Screens inside the car activated, displaying what appeared to be propaganda videos praising the UAC's work in argent energy harvesting. The narrator spoke of unlimited clean energy and unprecedented scientific advancement, but made no mention of the demonic invasion or the casualties it had caused. Vader ignored the corporate propaganda, focusing instead on gathering his strength for whatever awaited him at Lazarus Labs. The Baron's energy had enhanced his connection to this realm considerably, but it came with unexpected side effects. His armor, designed to sustain his broken body, now interfaced with the argent energy in ways its creators never intended. He could feel the power flowing through the suit's systems, enhancing its functions, but also causing subtle changes to its structure. Most concerning was the effect on his mind. The dark side had always whispered to him, offering power in exchange for submission to its will. Now those whispers carried new voices, ancient and terrible, speaking in languages that should have been incomprehensible but which he somehow understood. They spoke of endless war between dimensions, of betrayal among godlike beings, of a warrior chosen to be the instrument of vengeance. Vader shook off these alien thoughts, reinforcing his mental barriers. He was master here, not servant. Whatever entities ruled this hell dimension would learn that, just as the Baron had in its final moments. The transport began to slow as it approached its destination. Now arriving at Lazarus Labs, the automated voice announced, "Please exercise caution. Security alerts are active in this sector. Have a productive day." The doors slid open to reveal a scene of carnage. The reception area of Lazarus Labs was littered with bodies, both human and demonic. The walls were covered in symbols similar to those Vader had seen during the breach, but these appeared to have been deliberately carved rather than manifesting spontaneously. Blood formed patterns on the floor, creating a massive sigil whose purpose Vader could only guess at. As he stepped from the transport, Vader felt a shift in the energy around him. The Argent flow was stronger here, more concentrated. This was clearly an important nexus in the UAC's operations. But there was something else, a presence that registered in the Force as a void, an absence where there should be something. It reminded him of how Master Yoda had once described the presence of a skilled Force user cloaking themselves, but on a scale that dwarfed any such technique Vader had encountered. "You sense it, don't you?" Director Hayden's hologram materialized beside a security terminal. The Slayer. Even in stasis, his presence affects the fabric of this reality. The demons feel it too. That's why they've been trying to breach this sector. They fear he will wake. Vader observed the hologram with suspicion. "You directed me here deliberately, knowing the demons would attack this place. Why?" Hayden's featureless helmet betrayed no emotion, but Vader sensed satisfaction emanating from the projection. "2 reasons, Lord Vader. First, to test your capabilities against significant demonic opposition. Your performance exceeded expectations. Second, to place you in proximity to our most valuable asset. The Slayer's containment chamber is just beyond that laboratory." He gestured to a set of reinforced doors across the reception area. "I seek the interdimensional travel technology to return to my reality," Vader stated, "not a confrontation with this warrior." "The two are connected," Hayden explained. "The technology you seek was developed through study of the Slayer's Praetor suit and the Crucible, an artifact of immense power he carries. Both contain properties that allow for dimensional traversal. Unfortunately, access to these items requires waking the Slayer, which presents certain complications." Before Vader could respond, a new alarm sounded throughout the facility. Unlike the previous warnings, this one carried a sense of finality, of boundaries irreparably breached. "Warning," an automated voice announced. "Hellwave approaching critical mass. Dimensional stability compromised. The necropolis has emerged. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel." Hayden's hologram flickered, the projection becoming unstable. "It seems events have accelerated beyond my models. The demons are making their final push. They intend to destroy the Slayer before he awakens. If they succeed, all is lost. Not just this facility or Mars, but Earth and potentially your dimension as well. The barriers between realities are weakening." Through the Force, Vader sensed the truth in Hayden's words. Something massive was approaching, a concentration of malevolence that made the Baron seem insignificant by comparison. What is this necropolis? A mobile fortress of hell, a piece of their dimension given form and purpose. It houses the most powerful demon lords and their elite warriors. Its appearance in our reality indicates that the highest authorities of hell have taken personal interest in these events. Specifically, in you, Lord Vader. The implications were clear. Vader's arrival had accelerated a conflict that had been brewing for decades. His display of power against the Baron had drawn the attention of entities far more dangerous. "You manipulated me from the beginning," Vader accused. "You knew my presence would trigger these events." "I calculated probabilities," Hayden corrected. "Your arrival was unexpected, but once you were here, I saw an opportunity. The UAC has been playing both sides, harvesting energy from hell while knowing the demons plan an invasion. I needed a catalyst to break this stalemate, to force events to their conclusion. You provided that catalyst." The building shook as something massive impacted nearby. Through the windows of Lazarus Labs, Vader could see a structure materializing in the Martian sky. It resembled a colossal inverted cathedral. Its architecture, an impossible blend of organic and inorganic elements. Chains as thick as starships anchored it to the ground as it continued to phase into reality, displacing the very atmosphere with its presence. The Dree, necropolis, Hayden identified. At its heart is the ritual chamber, where the Hell priests perform the ceremonies that bind their dimension to ours. If you could reach that chamber and disrupt the ritual, it would destabilize the entire structure, but the opposition would be beyond anything you've faced thus far. Vader considered his options. The interdimensional technology he sought was apparently tied to this Slayer, whom both Hayden and the demons seemed fixated upon. If the demons destroyed the Slayer, Vader's chances of returning to his reality would diminish significantly. Additionally, the power contained within the necropolis might provide an alternative means of dimensional travel if he could seize control of it. "How do I awaken the Slayer?" Vader asked, making his decision. Hayden's hologram gestured toward a console near the laboratory doors. "That terminal controls his stasis chamber. A simple command will release the containment field. But be warned, the Slayer does not distinguish between allies and enemies when it comes to demons. His only purpose is their destruction. In his eyes, your current resonance with Hell's energy would mark you as a target." "I have faced zealots before," Vader replied dismissively. "This warrior is flesh and blood. Despite his reputation, he can be reasoned with, or failing that, subdued. If a hologram could express doubt, Hayden's would have. Many have made that assumption about the Doomslayer. None have survived to reconsider it. But perhaps your powers will prove the exception." The projection flickered again, more severely this time. "The necropolis is disrupting all UAC systems. This will be my last communication. Good luck, Lord Vader. If you survive, remember that knowledge is the ultimate power in any reality." With those parting words, Hayden's hologram dissolved into static and disappeared. Vader was left alone in the reception area, with the sounds of destruction growing closer by the second. He approached the console Hayden had indicated, studying its interface. The commands were straightforward enough, despite the unfamiliar technology. A series of warnings flashed across the screen when he attempted to access the containment protocols, each requiring authorization that Vader bypassed using the Force to manipulate the system's electronic components. Finally, a single command prompt appeared: "Release Doomslayer from stasis. Confirmation required." Vader activated the command without hesitation. The laboratory doors slid open, revealing a chamber dominated by a massive sarcophagus. The stone container was covered in runes similar to those Vader had seen throughout the facility, but these were different, more ancient. They did not glow with argent energy, but seemed to absorb it, creating a null zone around the sarcophagus. As Vader entered the chamber, the runes began to shift, rearranging themselves in response to his presence. The sarcophagus trembled, dust falling from its seams as something within stirred for the first time in what might have been centuries. A seam appeared down the center of the stone structure, widening as the two halves separated with glacial slowness. From within the sarcophagus rose a figure that immediately commanded Vader's full attention. The Doomslayer was encased in armor that resembled a more primitive version of Vader's own, but radiating a power that was unmistakable. His helmet concealed his features, but Vader could sense the focused hatred that emanated from him, a rage so pure and concentrated that it registered in the Force as a singularity of purpose. For a moment, the two armored warriors regarded each other in silence, separated by mere meters, but divided by realities of origin and purpose. Then the Slayer's gaze shifted beyond Vader, to the windows where the necropolis now dominated the Martian sky. A subtle change came over him, a tensing of muscles, a readiness that spoke of countless battles and an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. Without acknowledging Vader, the Slayer stepped down from the sarcophagus and moved toward a display case nearby. Within it rested a weapon unlike any Vader had seen before, a combination of ancient design and futuristic technology. The Slayer shattered the case with a single punch and retrieved the weapon, checking its mechanisms with practiced efficiency. Only then did he turn his attention back to Vader. The Slayer's stance shifted subtly, becoming more aggressive. He had noted Vader's resonance with Hell's energies, a consequence of absorbing the Baron's essence. But there was recognition too, an acknowledgement that Vader was something different from the demons he had hunted for eons. "I am not your enemy," Vader stated, keeping his lightsaber lowered but ready. "The demons are our common foe. I seek only to return to my dimension." The Slayer gave no verbal response. Instead, he pointed toward the necropolis, then to Vader, and finally to himself. The message was clear enough. They would confront the demons together, for their own reasons. It was not an alliance but a temporary convergence of purpose. When that purpose was fulfilled, the Slayer would reassess whether Vader was to be considered demonic and dealt with accordingly. Vader accepted this arrangement with a nod. He had no intention of becoming this warrior's enemy if it could be avoided. The Slayer's knowledge of dimensional travel, contained within his armor according to Hayden, was too valuable, and if combat became inevitable, Vader preferred to face this opponent after observing his capabilities firsthand. A thunderous crash interrupted their silent negotiation as the wall of the laboratory collapsed inward. Through the breach poured a new wave of demons, these more heavily armored and disciplined than those Vader had encountered previously. They moved with military precision, forming a semicircle around the two warriors. From their midst emerged a tall, emaciated figure wearing ceremonial robes adorned with symbols of authority and eldritch power. "Slayer," the Hell Priest hissed, its voice a disharmony of overlapping tones. "Your awakening was inevitable, but premature. The icon is not yet ready. The sacrifice is incomplete." Its gaze shifted to Vader. "And you, Dark One from beyond. Your interference was not foreseen by the prophecy. The necropolis comes for both of you now. Your souls will feed the well, your essences absorbed into the collective consciousness of hell." The Slayer's response was as direct as it was violent. He raised his weapon, a shotgun modified with technology that hummed with barely contained energy, and fired a blast that obliterated the demons standing between him and the Hell Priest. The priest raised a barrier of energy that absorbed the attack, but the effort caused it visible strain. Vader joined the assault without hesitation, lightsaber igniting as he charged the demonic ranks. The two warriors moved, with lethal efficiency, their styles contrasting yet complementary. The Slayer was raw aggression, each movement designed to kill as efficiently and brutally as possible. Vader was precision and control, the force guiding his strikes to maximum effect. Between them, the demons fell in waves, their bodies dissolving into argent energy that both warriors instinctively absorbed, each in their own way. The Hell Priest retreated through the breach, chanting incantations that caused the very air to warp and distort. Reality fractured around them as portions of the laboratory began to transform, merging with the architecture of hell. Walls became flesh, floor turned to bone, and the ceiling opened to reveal not the Martian sky but a vista of infinite suffering that was the heart of the demon dimension. Through this nightmarish transformation, Vader and the Slayer fought their way toward the exit, toward the necropolis that now dominated both the physical and spiritual landscape of Mars. They would need to reach it, penetrate to its ritual heart, and end the ceremony that was binding hell to this reality. Only then would Vader have any hope of accessing the dimensional travel technology he sought. As they emerged onto the surface of Mars, the full scale of the invasion became apparent. The entire UAC facility was in ruins, overrun by demonic forces. The sky burned with unnatural fire, and the ground itself had begun to transform, becoming a reflection of hell's landscape. In the distance, the necropolis hovered, a monument to corruption and power. Chains of energy anchored it to the transformed terrain, drawing sustenance from the conquered world. The Slayer paused, surveying the battlefield with the calm assessment of a veteran who had seen worse. He pointed to one of the massive chains, then to a vehicle nearby, a heavily armored transport that had somehow survived the initial invasion. His intent was clear: use the transport to reach the chain, then climb to the necropolis itself. Vader nodded in agreement. The plan was direct and efficient, qualities he valued. As they moved toward the transport, the ground erupted before them. From beneath the Martian soil emerged a creature that dwarfed even the Baron of Hell. It resembled a massive serpent, but with multiple limbs and a head that seemed composed of screaming faces fused together in torment. Its body pulsed with argent energy, and symbols identical to those in the laboratory were carved into its scales. Guardian of the Chains, came the telepathic voice of the Hell Priest, now safely within the necropolis. The oldest servant of the Mother. It has devoured armies, consumed the souls of worlds. Not even the Slayer has faced such a foe before. And certainly not one empowered by the rituals of the necropolis. The Guardian roared, a sound that transcended physical hearing and resonated directly in the mind. It struck with speed that belied its massive size, one clawed limb sweeping toward the warriors. The Slayer rolled aside, already firing his weapon at the creature's exposed flank. The shells exploded against the Guardian's scales, causing it to flinch but inflicting no serious damage. Vader took a different approach. Rather than evading, he stood his ground, using the Force to absorb and redirect the impact of the Guardian's attack. The creature's limbs stopped mid-air, held by an invisible barrier of Force energy. Vader then pushed back, sending a shockwave that staggered the massive demon, cracking several of its scales and exposing vulnerable flesh beneath. The Slayer noticed this opening immediately. With inhuman speed, he charged forward, switching weapons to what appeared to be a rifle that fired concentrated plasma. The superheated matter struck the exposed flesh, causing the Guardian to thrash in pain. Its movements became more erratic, more dangerous, as it lashed out with all its limbs simultaneously. Vader and the Slayer were forced to separate, each dealing with multiple attacks. The Dark Lord used his lightsaber to sever one of the smaller limbs, causing a gout of corrupted blood to spray across the battlefield. The fluid hissed where it landed, eating into the Martian soil like acid. The Guardian focused its rage on Vader, recognizing him as the source of its most serious injury. 3 limbs converged on Vader's position, forcing him to retreat. But the Dark Lord had faced worse odds before. Drawing deeply on both the Force and the argent energy he had absorbed, Vader created a telekinetic storm around himself. Debris from the destroyed facility rose into the air, orbiting him like satellites before launching toward the Guardian at tremendous speed. The improvised projectiles penetrated the creature's hide at multiple points, drawing roars of pain and fury. But the attack had left Vader momentarily vulnerable. One of the Guardian's limbs connected, sending him flying across the battlefield to crash into the remains of a UAC structure. His armor absorbed much of the impact, but the blow was still significant. As Vader rose to his feet, he saw the Slayer engaging the Guardian with reckless abandon. The warrior had climbed onto the creature's back and was firing his weapon point-blank into the wounds Vader's attack had created. The Guardian thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge its tormentor, but the Slayer moved with the fluid grace of someone who had fought such battles countless times before. Vader rejoined the fight, targeting the Guardian's head with precision Force attacks that disrupted its concentration. The creature was powerful but not particularly intelligent, relying on brute strength rather than strategy. Between the Slayer's relentless assault and Vader's surgical strikes, the Guardian began to weaken visibly. In a desperate gambit, the creature reared up to its full height, its chest expanding as it drew in massive amounts of argent energy from the surrounding area. The symbols on its scales glowed white-hot as it prepared to release this power in a devastating attack. The Slayer, recognizing the danger, leapt clear of the creature and took cover behind a fallen UAC tower. Vader, however, saw an opportunity. Rather than seeking shelter, he stepped forward, directly in the path of the impending blast. As the Guardian unleashed its attack, a torrent of pure argent energy that could have leveled what remained of the facility, Vader raised his hands and did what no being in this reality had done before. He caught the energy, held it, and began to channel it through the Force. The effort was tremendous, pushing Vader's abilities to their limit and beyond. His armor creaked under the strain, circuits overloading as they tried to process the massive energy influx. But the Dark Lord did not yield. He had been forged in the fires of Mustafar, remade through pain and hatred into something more than human. This crucible was just another test of his will, With a gesture that combined Sith techniques with his newfound understanding of Argent energy, Vader redirected the Guardian's attack back upon itself. The concentrated blast struck the creature's open mouth, traveling down its throat and erupting from within. The Guardian's body expanded momentarily, glowing from within like a small sun, before exploding in a cataclysmic release of energy and gore. The shockwave knocked both warriors off their feet, but they recovered quickly, hardened by their respective trials. As the dust settled, they found themselves surrounded by the Guardian's remains, its massive body reduced to fragments that continued to dissolve into Argent energy. This power flowed into both the Slayer and Vader, each absorbing it according to their nature. For the first time, the Slayer regarded Vader with something approaching respect. He nodded once, acknowledging the Dark Lord's power and his contribution to the battle. Then he turned his attention back to their original objective, the transport, and the chain leading to the necropolis. The vehicle was damaged but operational, its reinforced frame having withstood the Guardian's death throes. The Slayer took the controls without hesitation, his familiarity with UAC technology evident in his efficient handling of the systems. Vader claimed the weapon station, familiarizing himself with the targeting mechanisms as the transport rumbled to life. They set off toward the nearest chain, which pulsed with energy as it anchored the necropolis to the transformed landscape. The terrain between them and their objective was overrun with demons of all varieties, drawn by the death of the Guardian and the presence of their two most hated enemies. The transport's weapons blazed as Vader cleared a path, while the Slayer pushed the vehicle to its limits, navigating the treacherous ground with skill born of experience. As they approached the base of the chain, the true scale of the necropolis became apparent. It was not merely a structure but a city-sized fragment of hell itself, sustained in this reality by the rituals of the Hell Priests. The chain they aimed for was one of several, each as thick as a capital ship, and composed of a material that seemed to exist in multiple planes simultaneously, shifting between physical matter and pure energy. The transport couldn't take them further. They would need to ascend the chain on foot, fighting their way up to the necropolis against whatever defenses the demons had established. The Slayer exited the vehicle first, securing the immediate area with precise bursts from his shotgun. Vader followed, lightsaber at the ready as he surveyed the vertical battlefield before them. The chain itself provided their path upward, its links large enough to serve as platforms. Demonic runes covered its surface, pulsing with energy that responded to their presence. As they began their ascent, these runes activated, summoning defenders to repel the intruders. Imps and possessed soldiers appeared on the links above, raining fire and projectiles down upon them. The Slayer responded with characteristic aggression, his arsenal seemingly inexhaustible as he switched between weapons to counter each new threat. Vader provided support from below, using the Force to hurl enemies off the chain or to shield them both from particularly dangerous attacks. Together, they established a rhythm of advance and secure, steadily making their way upward toward the looming mass of the necropolis. Halfway up, they encountered a more organized resistance. A squadron of Hell Knights, massive humanoid demons with enhanced strength and resilience, had established a blockade on a wider section of the chain. Behind them stood a Hell Priest, different from the one they had encountered earlier but radiating similar power. This one carried a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with concentrated Argent energy. "The Slayer and the Dark One approach," the priest announced, its voice carrying unnaturally across the distance. The prophecy fragments further. The icon stirs in confusion, two destroyers where there should be one. The ritual must be completed before they reach the heart. The Hell Knights charged down the chain, their massive forms shaking the links with each step. The Slayer met them head-on, his shotgun blasting the lead knight back into its companions. Vader took a more strategic approach, using the Force to identify structural weaknesses in the chain segment where the demons had gathered. With precise application of his powers, he twisted one of the links, causing several Hell Knights to lose their footing and plummet toward the Martian surface far below. The Hell Priest observed this with visible concern. It raised its staff, chanting in a language that caused the air to distort. The crystal at the staff's tip glowed brighter as it channeled power from the necropolis above. A beam of concentrated argent energy shot forth, aimed directly at the Slayer. Vader, sensing the danger through the Force, intervened. He stepped into the path of the beam, lightsaber raised to intercept. The crimson blade caught the energy, but the power was beyond what even it could easily deflect. Vader's arm trembled with the effort of holding back the continuous stream of argent energy. The beam began to split around his lightsaber, parts of it striking his armor and causing systems to overload. The Slayer, seeing Vader's plight, changed tactics. Rather than engaging the remaining Hell Knights directly, he pulled a weapon from his back that neither the demons nor Vader had seen before. It resembled a rifle, but was clearly of different origin than his other armaments. The weapon charged with a high-pitched whine before releasing a pulse of blue-white energy that passed through the Hell Knights as if they were not there, striking the priest directly. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Hell Priest's channeling interrupted, its connection to the necropolis temporarily severed. The beam dissipated, allowing Vader to recover his stance. The priest staggered, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain coherence in this reality without the sustaining power of the ritual. The Slayer wasted no time. With inhuman speed, he closed the distance to the weakened priest, drawing yet another weapon as he did so. This one was unlike the guns and projectile weapons he had used thus far. It was a blade, ancient in design but humming with energy that resonated with the dimensional barriers themselves. The Crucible, Hayden had called it. The artifact that might hold the key to Vader's return. Before the Hell Priest could recover, the Slayer drove the Crucible through its chest. The blade passed through the priest's form as if it were smoke, but the effect was far more substantial than any physical wound. The priest's body began to collapse in on itself, its essence drawn into the blade as if it were a singularity. In moments, nothing remained of the powerful entity except a lingering echo of its final scream. The remaining Hell Knights, witnessing the destruction of their master, hesitated. It was all the opportunity Vader needed. Fully recovered from the priest's attack, he unleashed a force storm that caught the demons in a telekinetic maelstrom. Their massive bodies were lifted from the chain and suspended in mid-air, helpless as Vader methodically crushed their internal organs with precisely applied force pressure. One by one, they fell, their corpses tumbling into the abyss below. With the immediate threats eliminated, the warriors continued their ascent. The chain began to vibrate more intensely as they neared the necropolis, responding to the death of the Hell Priest and the approach of the Slayer. Above them, alarms sounded, carried on winds that should not exist in the thin Martian atmosphere. The demons were marshalling their final defenses. As they reached the anchor point where the chain connected to the necropolis, they were confronted with a massive gate forged from what appeared to be solidified argent energy and demonic bone. Runes of warding covered its surface, specifically designed to repel the Slayer. The warrior approached the gate without hesitation, examining the barriers with the experienced eye of someone who had broken through similar defenses countless times before. The Slayer turned to Vader, pointing at the gate and then making a gesture that suggested an explosion. His meaning was clear. They needed to breach this barrier with overwhelming force. But the runes were designed specifically against the Slayer's weapons and abilities, drawing on eons of conflict to create the perfect defense against his particular brand of violence. Vader, however, was an unknown variable in this reality. His powers, while enhanced by argent energy, operated on principles foreign to the Hell dimension. He stepped forward, placing his hand against the gate and extending his senses through the force. The barrier was indeed formidable, but like all defenses, it had been designed with specific threats in mind. The Slayer was anticipated, Vader was not. Drawing deeply on both the dark side and the argent energy he had absorbed, Vader began to probe the gate's structure at the molecular level. The runes flared in response, trying to repel his influence but finding no pattern to counter. With methodical precision, Vader identified the key nodes in the gate's energy matrix. the points where reality had been folded to create a barrier between dimensions. With a gesture that combined Sith sorcery with his newfound understanding of this realm's physics, Vader reversed the polarity of these nodes. The effect was catastrophic for the gate's integrity. Runes that had been designed to repel now attracted, energy meant to exclude now invited. The barrier began to tear itself apart from within, the carefully constructed wards turning against their creators. The gate exploded inward with a sound that transcended normal hearing, a fundamental rupture in the fabric of this hybrid reality. Beyond lay the outer precincts of the necropolis, a landscape that defied conventional physics. Architecture that should have been impossible supported structures that hurt the eye to observe. The ground pulsed like a living thing, and the air itself seemed to carry whispers of ancient, terrible secrets. The Slayer stepped through the breach without hesitation, weapons ready for the inevitable response. Vader followed, lightsaber humming with anticipation. They had penetrated the outer defenses of Hell's fortress, but the true challenge lay ahead. Somewhere in the heart of this abomination was the ritual chamber where the Hell priests were binding their dimension to this reality, and with it, perhaps, the means for Vader to return to his own universe. As they moved deeper into the necropolis, the environment became increasingly alien. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, sometimes lighter than Mars, sometimes crushingly heavy. The architecture shifted around them, corridors extending or contracting without warning. It was as if the structure itself was alive and aware of their presence, trying to disorient and separate them. The demons that guarded this place were unlike any they had encountered before. These were the elite of Hell's armies, warriors that had proven themselves in countless conflicts across multiple dimensions. They attacked with coordinated precision, using strategies that indicated intelligence far beyond the mindless aggression of lesser demons. Vader and the Slayer fought back to back, each covering the other's vulnerabilities. The Dark Lord's lightsaber carved through demonic flesh and armor with equal ease, while the Slayer's arsenal of weapons laid waste to anything that came within range. But for every demon they fell, more appeared, summoned by the necropolis itself to defend its innermost sanctums. As they battled through a particularly dense concentration of enemies, a new presence made itself known, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly into their minds with authority that transcended ordinary communication. Slayer, Dark One, your persistence is admirable but ultimately futile. The ritual nears completion. Soon, Hell will be permanently bound to this reality, and from here, we shall spread to all dimensions, including yours, Dark One. Your empire will fall before forces it cannot comprehend. The voice belonged to none of the Hell priests they had encountered thus far. This was something older, more fundamental to the Hell dimension itself. Vader sensed the truth through the Force. They were being addressed by the entity the Baron had mentioned, the Mother of Demons, the architect of the invasion and, perhaps, the key to understanding the dimensional technology Vader sought. The Slayer seemed to recognize the voice as well. His posture changed, becoming even more focused, more lethal. This was clearly an old adversary, one he had faced before without achieving final victory. He gestured to Vader, then pointed toward a massive structure at the center of the necropolis, a tower that pulsed with concentrated argent energy. The ritual chamber would be there, at the heart of Hell's power in this reality. But reaching it would not be easy. Between them and their objective lay what could only be described as an army. Thousands of demons of all varieties, from the lowest imps to creatures that rivaled the Guardian in size and power. They had been massed specifically to prevent the warriors from reaching the ritual chamber before the ceremony was complete. The Slayer assessed the situation with the cold calculation of a veteran who had faced impossible odds before and prevailed. He accessed something in his armor's systems, causing parts of his suit to reconfigure. Energy began to build around him, argent power channeled through technology that had been designed specifically to combat the forces of Hell. Vader recognized the strategy immediately. The Slayer was preparing to unleash his full power, to create an opening through the demonic ranks that they could exploit to reach the tower. But such an assault would leave him temporarily vulnerable afterward, his systems needing time to recharge. He would require protection during that critical period. Without words, a plan formed between them, communicated through the understanding that comes from shared combat. The Slayer would create the breach. Vader would ensure they both reached the tower. It was a strategy built on the strengths of both warriors, a combination of the Slayer's raw destructive power and Vader's tactical precision. The Slayer's armor completed its reconfiguration, now glowing with barely contained energy. He looked to Vader once, confirming their unspoken plan, then charged directly into the densest concentration of demons. What followed defied description, a whirlwind of violence so pure and focused that it seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The Slayer moved with impossible speed, each strike obliterating demons with such force that their essence was prevented from returning to hell, permanently destroying them. Vader followed in the Slayer's wake, using the Force to clear their path of debris and to deflect attacks from demons trying to flank them. The Dark Lord had witnessed many forms of combat prowess in his long career, from the elegant swordplay of Jedi Masters to the brutal efficiency of Mandalorian warriors. But the Slayer's fighting style was something entirely different, a perfect fusion of technology and primal rage refined through eons of single-minded purpose. As they neared the halfway point to the tower, the Slayer's armor began to show signs of strain. The energy that had fueled his rampage was depleting rapidly, the systems unable to sustain such output indefinitely. Sensing the warrior's imminent vulnerability, the demons redoubled their efforts, focusing their attacks on him with desperate intensity. Vader saw the danger and acted without hesitation, drawing deeply on the Force. Enhanced by the argent energy he had absorbed throughout their journey, he created a barrier around them both. The telekinetic shield absorbed the brunt of the demonic assault, giving the Slayer the precious seconds he needed to switch tactics. As his armor's energy reserves dropped to critical levels, the Slayer drew the crucible once more. The ancient blade ignited with renewed purpose, feeding on the ambient energy of the necropolis itself. With this weapon, he continued their advance, though at a more measured pace than his earlier berserker charge. Vader maintained the protective barrier with one hand while wielding his lightsaber with the other, a feat of concentration and power that would have been beyond most Force users. The dual crimson blades, so similar yet fundamentally different in their nature, carved a flawless path through the remaining demonic forces as the tower loomed ever larger before them. As they reached the base of the structure, they found their way blocked by a final defense line. 3 Hell Priests stood before the entrance, each channeling power from the ritual chamber above. Between them floated a sphere of pure argent energy, so concentrated that it distorted the space around it. This was no mere barrier but a weapon, designed specifically to annihilate anything that approached the tower. The priests began to chant in unison, causing the sphere to pulse with increasing intensity. Waves of energy radiated outward, disintegrating lesser demons caught in their path. This was a desperate measure, a willingness to sacrifice their own forces to prevent the Slayer and Vader from interrupting the ritual. The Slayer hesitated for the first time, assessing the threat. Even his armor and weapons might not withstand direct contact with such concentrated argent energy, but they had come too far to turn back now. The ritual was nearing completion. They could feel it in the increasing instability of the necropolis around them. Vader stepped forward, an idea forming in his mind. Throughout their journey, he had been absorbing and adapting to the argent energy of this realm, learning to manipulate it through the Force. The sphere before them was the purest concentration of that power he had yet encountered, a potential weapon of unimaginable destructive capacity. But it was also, perhaps, the key to reaching the ritual chamber. "I will handle this," Vader stated, his first words to the Slayer since their uneasy alliance began. "Be ready to advance when the opportunity presents itself." The Slayer regarded him for a moment, then nodded once. He took position behind Vader, crucible at the ready, prepared to exploit whatever opening the Dark Lord managed to create. Vader approached the barrier, lightsaber deactivated, and returned to his belt. The Hell Priests intensified, their chanting causing the sphere to expand and contract rhythmically, each pulse sending out a more powerful wave of destructive energy. The Dark Lord raised both hands, focusing his concentration on the Argent Sphere. What he attempted now went beyond anything he had done before, a fusion of Sith techniques with the fundamental forces of this alien reality. Rather than opposing the Argent energy directly, Vader sought to synchronize with it, to match the frequency of his own power with that of the sphere. It was like trying to tune an instrument to a note that existed beyond conventional hearing, a harmonic that transcended physical dimensions. The Hell Priests sensed what he was attempting and redoubled their efforts, pouring more power into the sphere to disrupt his concentration. The energy waves became more erratic, more destructive, tearing at Vader's armor and the very fabric of reality around him. But the Dark Lord did not yield. He had endured the fires of Mustafar, the lightning of the Emperor, the crushing vacuum of space. This was just another test of his will. Gradually, Vader established a connection with the Argent Sphere, his consciousness extending into its swirling energies. He could feel the power flowing through it, controlled by the combined will of the Hell Priests. But he could also sense the underlying patterns, the mathematical precision behind the apparent chaos. And within those patterns, a vulnerability. With a gesture that combined physical movement with force manipulation at its most refined, Vader reversed the flow of energy within the sphere. For a brief moment, the Argent power flowed backward through the connection to the Hell Priests, overloading their control of the barrier. The sphere pulsed once, twice, then collapsed in upon itself, releasing a shockwave that staggered both warriors but obliterated the priests where they stood. The way to the tower was clear. The Slayer wasted no time, charging forward with Vader close. Behind, they entered the structure to find a spiral pathway leading upward, toward the heart of the necropolis where the ritual was being performed. As they ascended, the air grew thick with energy, making each breath a struggle even for Vader's respirator. The tower's interior was largely unguarded, the demons having committed their forces to the external defense. But this absence of conventional opposition was replaced by something perhaps more dangerous. The very structure itself seemed alive, the walls pulsing with unhealthy light, floors shifting beneath their feet to disrupt their advance. This was the direct influence of the Mother of Demons, her power reaching out to hinder them as her priests completed the ritual that would bind hell permanently to the Martian reality. As they neared the top of the spiral, a new obstacle presented itself. The pathway ahead vanished, replaced by a yawning void that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. This was no mere physical gap, but a deliberate unmaking of space itself, a hole torn in reality that could not be crossed by conventional means. The Slayer approached the edge, studying the void with the caution of someone who had encountered similar traps before. He turned to Vader, pointing at the emptiness, and then making a gesture that suggested jumping. The implication was clear. They needed to cross this gap, but doing so might require abilities beyond normal movement. Vader assessed the situation through the Force. The void was indeed a tear in the dimensional fabric, a space where conventional physics did not apply. But it was still governed by rules, patterns that could be discerned and exploited by one sensitive to such things. He could feel currents of energy flowing through the emptiness, invisible paths that might support their passage if approached correctly. "There is a way across," Vader informed the Slayer, "but it requires perfect timing and coordination. The void shifts in patterns tied to the drug ritual above. We must move with those patterns, not against them." The Slayer absorbed this information quickly, his posture indicating readiness. Whatever doubts he might have had about Vader had been set aside in the face of their common purpose. The Dark Lord extended his senses fully into the void, tracking the flow of energies, waiting for the precise moment when the patterns aligned. "Now," Vader commanded, stepping forward into what appeared to be empty space. The Force guided his movements, allowing him to perceive and land on invisible platforms of energy that momentarily solidified beneath his weight. The Slayer followed, his timing perfect, moving from one ephemeral foothold to the next with the precision of a warrior who had honed his reflexes through countless battles. Together they crossed the void, reaching the solid pathway that resumed on the other side. Ahead of them loomed massive doors inscribed with runes that seemed to shift and writhe with malevolent purpose. Beyond those doors lay the ritual chamber, the heart of the necropolis, where the fate of this reality, and perhaps Vader's chance to return to his own, would be decided. The Slayer approached the doors without hesitation, crucible raised. The ancient blade ignited with renewed intensity as it neared the runic barriers, resonating with energies that transcended the merely physical. With a single powerful stroke, he brought the weapon down upon the center of the doors. The runes flared in resistance, then shattered as the crucible's power overwhelmed their protective magic. The doors burst inward, revealing a vast chamber dominated by a central altar. Upon this platform of bone and metal stood the remaining Hell Priests, 7 in number, arranged in a circle around a swirling vortex of pure argent energy. Above the vortex hovered a figure that could only be the Mother of Demons herself. She appeared simultaneously regal and monstrous, her form a contradiction that the mind struggled to reconcile. Parts of her resembled a woman of impossible beauty, while others were clearly demonic, festooned with horns and chitinous armor. Wings of both feather and membrane extended from her back, and a crown of fire adorned her head. In her hands, she held an orb that pulsed with the same energy as the vortex below, but concentrated to a degree that made the argent sphere at the tower's base seem trivial by comparison. "At last you arrive," the Mother spoke, her voice resonating on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. "The Slayer, my eternal adversary, and the Dark One from beyond. The unexpected variable in our great equation. You are too late. The ritual enters its final phase. Soon, the barriers between hell and this reality will be permanently dissolved. And from here, we shall extend our dominion to all dimensions, including yours, Dark One." The Slayer's response was immediate and predictable. He charged forward, weapons blazing, aiming to disrupt the ritual circle before the final incantations could be completed. But the Hell Priests were prepared for this assault. As one, they raised their staffs, creating a barrier that repelled even the Slayer's ferocious attack. The warrior was thrown back, his armor sparking from the impact. Vader took a more measured approach. Through the Force, he studied the energies flowing through the chamber, the connections between the priests, the vortex, and the Mother herself. The ritual was indeed nearing completion, but it was not yet irreversible. The key lay in the orb the Mother held, the focus through which the dimensional barriers were being eroded. "Your assessment is correct, Dark One," the Mother acknowledged, sensing his analysis. "The Nexus orb is the conduit through which we bind dimensions. It contains knowledge beyond your comprehension, including the secrets of interdimensional travel you seek." She smiled, the expression somehow more terrifying than any snarl. "Join us, and this knowledge could be yours. Your power, combined with ours, would be unstoppable. Even your Emperor would kneel before such might." The offer was tempting, presenting a path to the very knowledge Vader sought. But the Dark Lord had not survived this long by trusting the promises of entities whose very nature was deception and corruption. Moreover, he had seen enough of this hell dimension to know that its influence would eventually consume any who allied with it, no matter how powerful they might be. "I make no bargains with demons," Vader declared, igniting his lightsaber once more. The Mother's beautiful features contorted with rage. "Then you will die here, far from your home, your essence feeding our ritual. A fitting end for one who refuses the generosity of hell." At her command, the Hell Priests redirected their energies, focusing their attack on both warriors simultaneously. Beams of corrupted argent power lanced toward them, each powerful enough to disintegrate ordinary matter on contact. The Slayer rolled aside, his armor absorbing what his agility could not avoid. Vader created a force barrier, diverting the energy around him in a display of power that gave even the Mother pause. "Impressive," she acknowledged, "but futile. The ritual reaches its crescendo. Witness the merging of dimensions, the birth of a new hell. The vortex between the priests expanded rapidly, its energies reaching upward to connect with the Nexus orb. The mother began to chant in a language that hurt the mind to hear, each syllable causing reality to fracture further. The chamber itself began to transform, portions shifting between material existence and something other, a state of being incomprehensible to mortal minds. The Slayer, seemingly undeterred by the metaphysical chaos, adjusted his tactics. Rather than attacking the barrier directly, he targeted the floor beneath the priests, using his most powerful weapons to destabilize their footing. The strategy showed results as the circle began to waver, the priests struggling to maintain their positions amidst the destruction of their platform. Vader saw the opportunity this created and acted upon it. Channeling the Force through his lightsaber, he hurled the weapon in a precisely calculated arc. The blade spun through gaps in the fluctuating barrier, severing the staff of one priest before returning to Vader's hand. The break in the circle created a cascade effect, weakening the entire protective field. The mother snarled in frustration, pouring more of her own power into the ritual to compensate for the disruption. This, however, left her personally vulnerable, a fact that did not escape either warrior's notice. They exchanged a glance, an entire strategy communicated in that brief moment of understanding. The Slayer launched a renewed assault on the barrier, focusing all his firepower on the weakened section. The remaining priests struggled to contain the breach, drawing power from the vortex itself to reinforce their defenses. This, in turn, slowed the ritual's progress, buying precious time. Meanwhile, Vader approached from a different angle. Using the Force to enhance his physical abilities, he leapt upward, aiming not for the priests or the barrier, but for the mother herself. She was hovering above the ritual circle, beyond the range of conventional attacks, but not beyond the reach of a Force-empowered jump. The mother's eyes widened as Vader ascended toward her, lightsaber poised to strike. She raised the Nexus orb defensively, channeling its power into a blast of pure dimensional energy aimed at the Dark Lord. Vader met this attack head-on, his lightsaber splitting the beam as he continued his inexorable approach. For the first time, fear flickered across the mother's features. This was not proceeding according to the ancient patterns, the eternal conflict between Hell and its adversaries. The Dark One was an unknown quantity, his powers operating on principles that the demons, for all their eldritch knowledge, did not fully comprehend. As Vader reached the apex of his leap, mere meters from the mother, she made a desperate decision. Abandoning the ritual temporarily, she focused all her power into a single devastating attack. The Nexus orb blazed with energy as she hurled it directly at Vader, a projectile of concentrated dimensional power that would obliterate anything it touched. But the Dark Lord had anticipated this move. Instead of avoiding the orb, he reached out with the Force, catching it in mid-air. The contact was like grasping a sun, the power threatening to overwhelm even his considerable abilities. But Vader had not come this far to fail now. Drawing on reserves of strength forged through decades of pain and hatred, he held the orb suspended between himself and the mother. Then, with a gesture that combined telekinetic precision with his understanding of Argent energy, Vader reversed the orb's polarity. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Energy, intended to flow outward now, collapsed inward, creating a localized implosion that caught the mother in its grip. She screamed as her own power turned against her, her form beginning to distort as dimensional forces pulled her in multiple directions simultaneously. "This is impossible," she shrieked, her voice distorting as her physical form destabilized. "No mortal can command the Nexus orb, no power from beyond can interfere with the grand design." Vader landed on a platform of debris as the mother continued to dissolve, caught in the collapsing field of her own creation. "The power of the dark side transcends your understanding," he stated simply, "as does your failure." With the mother incapacitated, the ritual began to unravel. The Hell priests, their connection to their mistress severed, lost control of the energies they had been channeling. The vortex at the center of their circle became unstable, its swirling patterns breaking down into chaotic fluctuations that lashed out in all directions. The Slayer, seizing this opportunity, broke through the weakened barrier and engaged the priests directly. His arsenal of weapons, combined with physical prowess that rivaled anything Vader had witnessed, made short work of the confused and disorganized demons. One by one they fell, their bodies dissolving into the unstable vortex, adding to the dimensional chaos engulfing the chamber. As the last priest fell, the vortex began to collapse in on itself. The necropolis shuddered, the binding energies that had held it in this reality weakening with each passing second. Soon, the entire structure would be pulled back into the hell dimension, along with anyone unfortunate enough to remain within its walls. The Slayer seemed unconcerned by this development. He approached the failing vortex with purpose, drawing the crucible once more. With practiced movements, he plunged the blade into the heart of the dimensional tear. Instead of accelerating the collapse, this action appeared to stabilize it, channeling the chaotic energies through the ancient weapon. The vortex contracted, condensing into a more controlled portal, one that the Slayer clearly intended to use. Before stepping through, he turned to Vader. For the first time, the warrior removed his helmet, revealing a face hardened by countless battles, aged not by years, but by the weight of an eternal mission. His eyes held knowledge beyond mortal comprehension, a wisdom born of endless conflict against the forces of corruption. He pointed to the portal, then to himself, making it clear that he intended to follow the retreating forces of hell back to their dimension, to continue his one-man war against demonkind. Then he gestured to the Nexus Orb, still suspended in the field of Vader's force power, and finally to the Dark Lord himself. The meaning was clear. The orb contained the knowledge Vader sought, the means to return to his own dimension. It was his to claim, the spoils of their unlikely alliance. Vader inclined his head in acknowledgement, a warrior's respect for a kindred spirit. They had fought together against a common enemy, each for their own reasons, each following their own code. That was enough. The Slayer replaced his helmet and stepped into the stabilized portal without a backward glance. The dimensional tear contracted behind him, severing the direct connection between Mars and the Hell dimension. The collapse of the necropolis accelerated, the structure beginning to fold in upon itself as it was pulled back to its plane of origin. Vader turned his attention to the Nexus Orb, still crackling with power but now under his control. Through the Force, he could sense the knowledge contained within it, the understanding of dimensional travel that he had sought since his arrival in this reality. With careful precision, he began to extract this information, absorbing it into his consciousness while discarding the corrupting influence of the Hell dimension. The process was delicate and dangerous, like separating poison from medicine. But Vader's mind was disciplined, honed through years of Sith training and personal suffering. He took what he needed, the pure mathematical principles that govern travel between dimensions, while rejecting the eldritch lore and demonic rituals that had perverted this knowledge. As the last useful information was extracted, Vader released his hold on the orb. Without his power to contain it, the object collapsed in upon itself, disappearing with a final flash of argent energy. The Dark Lord now possessed what he required to return to his galaxy, to the empire he had helped build, and the Emperor he both served and plotted against. The chamber around him was disintegrating rapidly, pulled into the dimensional void along with the rest of the necropolis. Vader made his way to the edge of the collapsing structure, using the Force to enhance his speed and agility as he navigated the dissolving architecture. He reached the outer perimeter, just as the central tower imploded, the resulting shockwave propelling him clear of the necropolis entirely. Vader landed on the Martian surface some distance away, watching as the massive structure vanished entirely, leaving behind only a crater and fading echoes of its presence in this reality. The sky above began to clear, the unnatural fire dissipating as the influence of Hell receded. Mars was returning to its natural state. the invasion thwarted by the unlikely alliance of two warriors from different dimensions. But the planet was far from safe. The UAC facility lay in ruins, its personnel mostly dead or corrupted. The few survivors would face a harsh existence on this desolate world, far from Earth and surrounded by the remnants of demonic influence. Vader felt no particular concern for their fate. His priorities lay elsewhere, with the knowledge he had gained and the return journey that awaited him. Using the principles extracted from the Nexus orb, Vader began to formulate the mathematical framework for a dimensional portal. The process was complex, requiring both precise calculations and significant power to execute. Fortunately, he had absorbed enough Argent energy throughout his time in this reality to fuel such an endeavor. His armor, too, had been altered by exposure to this realm's physics, its systems now capable of channeling energies that would have overloaded them before. Vader found a relatively intact section of the UAC facility, a laboratory that contained equipment he could repurpose for his needs. Working with methodical precision, he constructed a device that would focus and direct the dimensional energies required for his return. The design incorporated elements of both Imperial technology from his memory and the UAC's Argent processors, creating a hybrid machine uniquely suited to his purpose. As the device neared completion, Vader sensed a presence approaching. Through the Force, he identified it as Director Hayden, or what remained of him. The UAC leader's body was heavily damaged, parts of it replaced with cybernetics that appeared to have been assembled from salvaged demonic technology. He moved with the jerky motions of someone whose neural connections were imperfectly aligned with their physical form. "Lord Vader," Hayden greeted, his voice even more synthetic than before. "I see you survived the collapse of the necropolis. And the Slayer?" "He returned to the Hell dimension to continue his war," Vader replied, not pausing in his work. "Your facility is destroyed, your research corrupted, your ambitions ended." Hayden made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The UAC is more than buildings and equipment, Lord Vader. Knowledge survives, and with knowledge comes opportunity." He gestured to his reconstructed body. "I have already begun adapting demonic technology to my needs. In time, we will rebuild, stronger than before." Vader regarded the director with cold assessment. "You play with forces beyond your comprehension. The demons permitted your experiments only because they served Hell's purposes. Without their support, your research will fail. And should they return, they will not be so easily defeated a second time." "Perhaps," Hayden acknowledged, "but risks must be taken for progress to occur. You understand this, I think. Your own pursuit of power has clearly exacted its toll," he indicated Vader's life support armor. "We are not so different, you and I, both willing to sacrifice much for our goals." "There is one significant difference," Vader stated, activating his newly constructed device. A swirling vortex of energy began to form, similar to the portal the Slayer had used but calibrated to Vader's home dimension. "I will achieve mine." Hayden watched the portal with scientific curiosity. "Impressive. You've mastered dimensional travel in a fraction of the time it took our best scientists. Your Emperor will be pleased with such knowledge." Vader did not bother to respond. The Emperor would indeed covet this technology, but Vader had no intention of sharing its full potential. Like the Sith holocrons he had studied and subsequently hidden from his master, this knowledge was power, an advantage to be preserved for the right moment. As the portal stabilized, Vader felt the familiar resonance of his home galaxy calling to him through the Force. The connection was weak but distinct, a beacon guiding him back to where he belonged. Before stepping through, he turned to Hayden one final time. "Should you survive the aftermath of this invasion, remember what you witnessed here. There are forces in the universe more terrible than your demons, and they are watching." With those parting words, Vader entered the portal. The transition was less violent than his arrival had been, his consciousness remaining intact as he traversed the dimensional boundary. He emerged in a corridor of the Death Star, the exact location from which he had been taken. Alarms blared throughout the station, indicating that little time had passed since the Emperor's failed experiment. Stormtroopers rushed past, too focused on their emergency protocols to notice the Dark Lord's return. Vader observed them dispassionately, noting how ordinary they seemed after the horrors he had witnessed in the other dimension. These soldiers feared him, yes, but they knew nothing of true terror. They had never faced the legions of hell or stood in the presence of the Mother of Demons. Vader made his way to the Emperor's laboratory, where the dimensional tear had first appeared. As expected, he found chaos. Equipment lay destroyed, personnel dead or injured, and at the center of it all, a figure in black robes, seemingly unharmed, but clearly shaken by the backlash of his failed experiment. Emperor Palpatine turned as Vader entered, his yellow eyes widening in surprise. "Lord Vader," he rasped, "you survived the collapse of the portal. Impressive, most impressive." Vader inclined his head in acknowledgement, revealing nothing of his experiences or the knowledge he had gained. "The experiment was flawed, my master. The energies you attempted to harness are too unstable for our current technology." Palpatine's expression darkened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps my apprentice interfered at a critical moment, disrupting what would have been my greatest achievement." He studied Vader with suspicious eyes. "You seem changed by your brief exposure to the anomaly. What did you witness in those few seconds, Lord Vader?" "Only darkness and chaos," Vader replied truthfully, if incompletely. "Nothing of value to the Empire." The Emperor clearly did not believe this explanation, but he was too pragmatic to pursue it further at this moment. The failed experiment had cost him resources and personnel that would need to be replaced. The investigation into what exactly had occurred could wait. "Return to your duties, Lord Vader," Palpatine commanded. "The rebellion grows, bolder by the day. They require your attention." "As you wish, my master." As Vader left the laboratory, he felt the weight of his armor, now subtly altered by its exposure to Argent energy. Within its systems, traces of that power remained, a reminder of the Hell dimension and the knowledge he had brought back. In time, he would explore this further, adapting what he had learned to his own purposes. The ability to travel between dimensions, to access new sources of power, could tip the balance in his favor when the moment came to challenge his master. But that was for the future. For now, Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, resumed his role in the Empire, outwardly unchanged by his journey. Only the Force knew the truth, and the Force kept its secrets well. In the depths of space, far from Imperial sensors, a faint distortion appeared briefly in the fabric of reality. Within it, a figure could be glimpsed, armored and implacable, continuing his eternal hunt. The Doomslayer's war went on, in hell and beyond, an endless crusade against the forces of corruption. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between battles, he remembered a warrior from another dimension who had fought alongside him, whose darkness had matched hell's own yet turned against it. Such alliances were rare in the multiverse, brief convergences of purpose between beings whose paths should never have crossed. But the barriers between realities had been weakened. What had happened once could happen again. The demons remembered Darth Vader, and they feared his return. And in the shadows of the Death Star, as Vader meditated in his hyperbaric chamber, he sometimes heard the whispers of entities beyond the comprehension of his galaxy, promising power, offering allegiance, seeking to corrupt. He ignored them all. The Dark Lord of the Sith served no master but his own ambition. Yet he kept the knowledge of dimensional travel secure in his mind, a weapon to be used when the time was right. For Vader had glimpsed a truth in the Hell dimension, a reflection of his own existence. Power always came with a price, and those who sought it must be prepared to pay in blood and pain and the corruption of their very souls. It was a price Vader had paid long ago, on the burning shores of Mustafar. What more could Hell possibly take from him that he had not already lost?